Time is running out on Andrew Forrest's self-imposed deadline to find jobs for 50,000 Indigenous Australians. The mining magnate set the ambitious target in 2008. Now, with less than a week to go, the Australian Employment Covenant is 5,000 positions short. They're working hard to reach their goal, but an even bigger challenge is looming, as Siobhan Barry reports.
Until recently, 25-year-old Nathan Byrd had been unemployed for 3 months.
It's not fun. It does hinder your life somewhat. Where I was living, lease ended, but I couldn't get another place. I've actually had to move back in with the parents for a bit until I got another job. So, yeah, it's not a good feeling.
Now he's landed a job as a bus driver with a private company north of Brisbane through the Australian Employment Covenant. Both Nathan and his boss agree it's been a win-win outcome.
You know, Nathan has a very positive attitude and ability to drive, which is a real big sort of step to get over when you're recruiting drivers.
How much does having this job mean to you?
A lot. Yeah, a lot, I guess. It allows me to get my life back on track and have my own life once again, not having to rely on people for stuff, so it's good.
The West Australian mining boss Andrew Forrest is the driving force behind the Australian Employment Covenant. He's witnessed the disparity between black and white Australia, growing up among Indigenous friends, only to lose touch with many.
You don't really know where they are. You've made a few phone calls to a couple of Indigenous mates and they say, oh, he's over there, or she's gone out to that mission, or she's stuck up in Karratha or some other place. And then you're invited to their funeral.
He talks to business leaders, explaining that he thinks welfare actually widens the gap between black and white and that employment is the only solution. And he says it's best to provide the jobs first, then the training.
And Aboriginal people have to see that floodlit pathway, not an obscure crawl, which they've always had, but a floodlit pathway direct to a well-paying job.
Using that philosophy, Andrew Forrest launched the Australian Employment Covenant in 2008, backed by some of corporate Australia's heavyweights and supported by high-profile Indigenous Australians. The aim was, over 2 years, to get employers to agree to make 50,000 sustainable jobs available for Indigenous workers as the need arose. Once the jobs are available, candidates would undertake federal government-funded training.
There always has been training available. Has it been directed into a guaranteed outcome? No, it hasn't. Now we can direct training specified by the employers into a guaranteed outcome.
Job seekers promise to remain in a position for at least 26 weeks, and employers provide a mentor for that period. Andrew Forrest stresses it's not charity.
We're doing it because it creates for better businesses. It increases the culture and the morale of a company for every covenant participant, for every company who's ever successfully employed an Australian Indigenous person. It adds another depth to their organisation.
More than 2.5 years since its launch, the Australian Employment Covenant has achieved the promise of more than 45,000 jobs and has set a deadline of the end of June to reach its target of 50,000 jobs.
And the pressure is so on. We've got people working around the clock.
While it's been a hard road, those working the phones at the Employment Covenant say employers are getting on board.
I think a lot of employers haven't known exactly how to go about Indigenous employment. They have good intentions, but they're just not sure how to go about things. So to have an organisation such as the Employment Covenant come along and offer to assist them in that process, I think has been a relief for many employers.
Seth Holswich is one of the Employment Covenant's regional managers. He says the initiative's already creating a culture change in mainstream corporate Australia and jobs for the long-term unemployed.
I certainly know of cases where people who are getting a job, it's the first time anyone in their immediate family has had a full-time job, almost in living memory. So to actually have the money coming in that a full-time job provides, to have that change of attitude and outlook and to be able to provide for their families, it just has flow-on effects.
But so far, only about 4,000 of those 45,000 positions have been filled. That's partly because many of the jobs aren't yet available.
We do have a board over here that has all the current vacancies.
Added to that is getting job seekers the necessary training, which is proving to be a stumbling block.
Quite often, long-term unemployed job seekers, whether they're Indigenous or not, have certain levels of disadvantage. They have barriers to them getting into employment. Otherwise, again, they potentially would have been in a job already. So it's actually trying to find the suitable work-ready job seekers for each of those employers as positions become available that is still proving to be a major challenge.
So from the 1st of July, the focus will shift from securing job promises to working more closely with trainers and employers to get the positions filled. But not everyone agrees with the Employment Covenant's approach. Researcher Kiralee Jordan says the initiative's generated important discussion about increasing Indigenous job opportunities. But she says it shouldn't be assumed that employment is always the solution to Indigenous disadvantage.
For a lot of people, moving into employment can actually be detrimental to their well-being. So, for example, if a job doesn't match their particular needs or their aspirations, it may be that moving into some kinds of work actually increase their levels of stress and can lead to particular tensions with their families and communities.
Don't give up.
And she says while generating job promises has been positive, some of the jobs may never become available, and of those that do, some will be filled by non-Indigenous workers.
If an employer does offer a job, there may be no Indigenous applicants for that particular job, in which case they'd be perfectly entitled to employ a non-Indigenous person. And I think that's fine, but it does mean that with that figure we have to be a bit cautious about interpreting it.
But for now, the Employment Covenant's firmly fixed on its deadline. If they're successful, they have an in-principle agreement to present the federal government with a draft policy on jobs training. For Andrew Forrest, there's a lot riding on the next 6 days.
The challenge has been enormous, but as a betting man and the eternal optimist, I think we'll get there.
Siobhan Barry with that report.